I don't think I've ever been to a weirder comedy show. I'm Helen Lewis, I'm a staff writer from The Atlantic, and I'm just back from Riyadh, where I attended the Riyadh Comedy Festival, which in the last couple of weeks has hosted some of the biggest name American comedians, from Louis C.K. to Dave Chappelle via Aziz Ansari, and many, many others you might recognise, particularly from the podcast world. Now, from the start, it was really controversial that these comedians took the money. First of all, the invitation came directly from the Saudi state. And second of all, Saudi Arabia has faced strong criticism in America for its human rights abuses. It is a country which locks up and executes critics of the regime of Mohammed bin Salman, the 40-year-old elder millennial crown prince. Now, the other side of MBS is that he's behind a huge modernization and liberalization regime in the kingdom. So I walked around Riyadh without my hair covered, not wearing an abaya, just wearing relatively modest clothes. That is something that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, when the religious police would have come over and hassled you for it. But there's a paradox there, which is MBS liberalises exactly as much as he wants, and he will not be questioned. So at exactly the same time that he, for example, allowed women to drive, one of these really totemic reforms in modern Saudi Arabia, he arrested a women's rights activist who had been campaigning for exactly that right. What was the show like? Well, I don't think I've ever been to a weirder comedy show. For a start, because no alcohol is allowed in Saudi Arabia, everyone was stone cold sober. That's pretty unusual for a comedy club. Then the evening was held in a converted boxing and other kind of sports arena, so it was held in the round. And, you know, both Jimmy Carr, the British comedian, and Louis C.K. did pretty much their hometown set. Louis C.K., for example, did, a riff about jury duty, not something that happens in Saudi Arabia, about how much he didn't like it when it rained. Again, it's a desert. And then finally about how an elderly woman in his building, liked to wear a tube top and tight shorts. Again, not a problem in Saudi Arabia, which has very, very modest dress customs. So it was, in one sense, a very groundbreaking thing. And the other, though, the comedians were all asked to sign a waiver which said, we won't criticise Islam and we won't criticise the Saudi government. And that's what their critics are pointing to. How much is this about opening up Saudi Arabia, and how much is this about whitewashing some of its human rights abuses? And that's the question that has torn the comedy world apart.